The stars had always been cold, but Doan had never felt their coldness until now. He stood in the cargo bay of the great ship called Eternal Dawn, surrounded by 42 other people. Some were old. Some were sick. Some, like him, were simply small. They had one thing in common. The pack had decided they were no longer useful. Dahan was 17 years old, but he looked 14. A genetic defect had stopped his body from growing properly. His bones were thin. His muscles were weak. In a society that valued strength above all things, he had always been a problem. An embarrassment. A mouth to feed with nothing to offer in return. The Eternal Dawn was one of 12 ships that made up the pack fleet. For 300 years, the pack had traveled between stars, never staying in one place for long. They mined asteroids, harvested gas giants, and built colonies that they would eventually abandon when resources ran dry. They were survivors. They were hard. And they had no room for weakness. 3 days ago, the fleet had passed through an unstable nebula. The radiation had damaged 6 ships beyond repair. Food production systems had failed. Water recyclers had broken down. The Pack Council had gathered to make a terrible choice. Admiral Taiwan had stood before the council with his broad shoulders and his cold eyes. He was a large man with a voice like grinding metal. He had served the pack for 40 years, and he believed in one thing above all else. The strong survive, and the weak must be cut away. We cannot feed everyone, Taiwan had announced. We cannot carry everyone. If we try, we all die. The math is simple. We must reduce our numbers by 50 souls, or the fleet will not survive the journey to the next system. There had been arguments. There had been tears. But in the end, the council had agreed. They would leave behind the old, the sick, and the useless. They would drop them on a small moon called KR-7 with enough supplies to last a few weeks. It was not murder, the council told themselves. It was simply survival. Now Dahan stood in the cargo bay, waiting to be thrown away like garbage. Around him, people wept. An old woman named Grandmother Yunji held her grandson's jacket against her chest. She had raised 3 generations of pack children. Now she was too old to work, so she was being discarded. A man named Uncle Jung-ho sat in the corner with bandages around his eyes. He had lost his sight in the nebula accident while saving 2 engineers. His reward was exile. But not everyone cried. Near the back of the bay, a woman sat with perfect stillness. Her name was Yuna, and she was 31 years old. She had been blind since birth, but she was one of the finest engineers the pack had ever produced. Her hands could feel problems that others could not see. Her ears could hear the heartbeat of machines. But the council had decided that a blind engineer was a luxury they could no longer afford. Beside her sat an old man with white hair and a face like cracked leather. His name was Mansu, and he was 73 years old. Once, he had been the pack's greatest weapons master. He had designed the defense systems that had saved the fleet from pirates 100 times. But his hands shook now, and his memory sometimes wandered. Too old, the council had said. Too slow, too useless. Dahan watched these people, and something burned in his chest. It was not fear. It was not sadness. It was anger. A cold, patient anger that wrapped around his heart like iron chains. The cargo bay doors opened, and Admiral Taiwan walked in. He was flanked by 4 soldiers in black armor. He looked at the condemned the way a farmer looks at diseased animals before burning them. "The shovels are ready," Taiwan said. His voice held no emotion. "You will be taken to KR-7. You will be given supplies. What happens after that is not our concern." Grandmother Yunji stepped forward. Tears ran down her wrinkled face. "Please," she begged. "I have served this pack for 60 years. I held your mother when she was born, Taiwan. Does that mean nothing? Taiwan's expression did not change. My mother is dead. The past is dead. Only the future matters, and you are not part of it. He turned to leave, but a small voice stopped him. You will regret this. Everyone looked at Dohan. The boy was so small that people often forgot he was there. But now he stood with his back straight and his eyes fixed on the Admiral. There was something in those eyes that made even the armed soldiers shift uncomfortably. Taiwan laughed. It was a cruel sound. And what will you do, little cub? You cannot even lift a rifle. You cannot run a kilometer without collapsing. You are the weakest thing on this ship. In a week, you will be dead, and the pack will forget you ever existed. Doan did not blink. You measure worth by strength, by size, by what a person can carry or kill. But you have forgotten something important, Admiral. And what is that? The universe does not care about strength. It only cares about will. And my will is stronger than you can possibly imagine. Taiwan stared at the small boy for a long moment. Then he shook his head and walked away. Load them on the shuttles, he ordered his soldiers. And make it quick. I want to be out of this system within the hour. The soldiers herded the condemned toward the waiting shuttles. Dohan walked without resistance, but his eyes never left the Admiral's retreating back. He memorized everything about that moment. The sound of Taiwan's boots on the metal floor. The smell of recycled air. The feeling of betrayal that hung in the cargo bay like poison. The shuttle ride to KR-7 took 20 minutes. The moon was a dead rock with thin atmosphere and frozen ground. The soldiers unloaded crates of food, water, and basic survival equipment. Then they left without a word. Dohan stood on the surface of KR-7 and watched the shuttles fly back to the eternal dawn. He watched the great ship's engines flare to life. He watched the entire pack fleet turn and accelerate toward the distant stars. Around him, people collapsed to the ground and wept. They believed they were going to die. They believed their lives were over. But Dohan believed something different. He looked up at the stars that had abandoned him, and he made a promise. Not to the people around him. Not to the universe. To himself. I will survive, he whispered. I will grow strong. And one day, I will return. When that day comes, Admiral Taiwan, you will understand the mistake you made today. The cold wind of KR-7 howled around him, but Dohan did not shiver. The fire in his heart was enough to keep him warm. The smallest cub had been forsaken, but he was not finished. He was only beginning. The first night on KR-7 was the hardest. The temperature dropped to 40 degrees below zero. The thin atmosphere screamed with winds that could knock a grown man off his feet. The 43 abandoned souls huddled together in emergency shelters, listening to the planet try to kill them. Many of them had given up already. They sat with empty eyes and waited for death. What was the point of fighting? The pack had thrown them away. They had no ship, no resources, no hope. They were old, sick, broken people on a dead moon at the edge of nowhere. But Dohan refused to accept this. On the second morning, he called everyone together. His voice was soft, but something in it made people listen. I know what you are thinking, he said. You think we are going to die here. You think the pack has killed us. But I want you to understand something. We are still alive. Our hearts are still beating. Our minds are still working. As long as that is true, we have not lost. An old man laughed bitterly. Look at us, boy. We are the garbage of humanity. What can we possibly do? Dohan pointed at Yuna, the blind engineer. She cannot see, but she can build machines that most engineers cannot imagine. He pointed at Mansu, the elderly weapons master. His hands shake, but his mind holds 300 years of military knowledge. He pointed at himself. I am small and weak, but I can think. I can plan. I can lead." He looked around at all of them. "The pack measured us by what we cannot do. From this moment forward, we will measure ourselves by what we can do. And together, we can do more than they ever imagined." It was a beautiful speech. But speeches do not keep people alive. They needed food, water, shelter, and warmth. They needed to survive the next week before they could think about the next year. Duhan organized everyone into teams. Those who could still walk explored the area around their camp. Those who could not walk helped sort supplies and plan rationing. Yuna began examining the emergency equipment, figuring out how to make it last longer. Mansu trained those who were willing in basic self-defense, because even a dead moon might have dangers. On the 5th day, a young woman named Jiwon made a discovery that changed everything. Jiwon was 22 years old with a damaged heart that made her too weak for heavy labor. The pack had decided she was not worth the medicine needed to keep her alive. But her eyes were sharp, and she noticed something strange about a rock formation 2 kilometers from camp. "There are patterns in the stone," she told Dohan. "They look like they were carved. Like writing." Dohan gathered a small team, and they went to investigate. What they found made Dohan's heart stop. Hidden beneath the rock formation was a door. It was made of a metal that none of them recognized. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. This was not human technology. This was something else entirely. "Aliens," Mansu whispered. "The old stories were true. We are not alone in the universe." It took Yuna 3 days to figure out how to open the door. She felt along its surface with her sensitive fingers, finding patterns and mechanisms that no one else could detect. When the door finally slid open, they discovered a tunnel leading deep into the moon. What they found below changed their fate forever. The tunnel stretched for kilometers in every direction. They were filled with machines that still hummed with power after thousands of years. Screens displayed information in languages no human had ever seen. Rooms held tools and devices that seemed like magic. Dohon named the builders of this place the architects. Whoever they were, they had vanished long ago. But they had left behind their technology, sleeping and waiting for someone to wake it up. Over the following months, the survivors learned to use this gift. Yuna was the key. Her blindness had sharpened her other senses, and she seemed to understand the architect machines in ways no one else could. She activated medical systems that healed wounds and cured diseases. She woke up construction drones that could build shelters from raw stone. She found food synthesizers that could turn basic elements into nutrition. The ancient medical technology offered to fix Dohan's genetic defect. It could make him tall and strong, like the pack warriors who had thrown him away. But Dohan refused. "This body is my reminder," he explained to Yuna. "Every time I look in the mirror, I remember what they did to us. I remember why we fight. I will not change who I am just to look like them." As the months passed, the 43 survivors grew stronger. The architect technology gave them advantages that the pack could never imagine. But they were still too few to challenge anyone. They needed more people. It was Mansu who suggested the answer. "We are not the only ones the packs have abandoned," he said. "Every year, ships drop their unwanted members on moons and asteroids across this region of space. Most of them die, but some might still be alive, waiting for rescue." Doan liked this idea. He ordered Yuna to search the architect databases for communication technology. She found something better. She found a network of sensors that could detect human life signs across dozens of light years. They were not alone. Over the next 3 years, Dohan organized rescue missions. Using small ships built by the architect drones, they traveled to distant moons and asteroids. They found survivors everywhere. Old people left to die. Sick people abandoned without medicine. Children whose parents had been taken away. All of them had been declared useless by the packs, All of them had refused to die. Duhan welcomed each of them with the same words. You are not garbage. You are not useless. You are one of us now. You are forsaken. By the end of the third year, their numbers had grown from 43 to over 500. They had built a hidden base inside KR-7, powered by architect reactors and protected by architect shields. They had food, water, medicine, and weapons. They had become something that no one had expected. They had become a force. On the night of the third anniversary of their abandonment, Daohan stood before his people. His body was still small. His frame was still thin. But when he spoke, giants listened. 3 years ago, the pack threw us away because they thought we were weak. They measured our bodies and found them lacking. But they never measured our hearts. They never measured our will. They never measured our anger. He raised his fist toward the ceiling of their underground city. We are the forsaken. We are the abandoned. And we will never forget what was done to us. One day, we will return to the stars. And when we do, the packs will learn the truth. The smallest cub can grow into the most dangerous wolf. The crowd roared with voices that had once begged for mercy. Those days were over. 10 years had passed since the abandonment. Doham stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Silent Vengeance, and watched the stars through the main viewing window. He was 27 years old now, but he still looked like a teenager. His body had never grown past its stunted form. He stood barely 5 feet tall, and his arms were thin as sticks. But no one who met him ever thought of him as small. There was something in his eyes that made people forget about his body. A fire, a weight, a presence that filled any room he entered. The Forsaken had grown beyond anything Doan had imagined. What started as 43 castaways on a dead moon had become a civilization of 12,000 people, spread across a network of hidden stations and bases. They had ships now, real warships built with architect technology that could outrun and outfight anything the packs could field. They had soldiers, engineers, doctors, and scientists. They had become a power. But they were not conquerors. Dohan had made this clear from the beginning. The Forsaken did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for the abandoned. They fought for the people that the packs threw away like garbage. The door behind him opened, and Sujin walked in. She was 34 years old, tall and strong, with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek. Once, she had been a pack soldier, one of the elite warriors who enforced the will of the fleet admirals. But 5 years ago, she had watched her commander order the abandonment of wounded soldiers after a battle with pirates. When she refused to leave them behind, she was declared a traitor and scheduled for execution. The Forsaken had rescued her. Now she was Dohan's second in command and his closest friend. We found another group, Sujin reported. 87 people on an asteroid in the Broken Belt. They have been there for 2 years. The pack that abandoned them thought they would be dead within months. Doan nodded. Send the rescue team. Bring them home. Already done. Sujin paused. There is something else. Our spies report that Admiral Taiwan has been promoted. He is now Supreme Commander of the United Pack Fleet. Dohan was silent for a moment. Admiral Taiwan, the man who had looked at him with disgust and called him the weakest thing on the ship. The man who had condemned 43 people to death without blinking. Now he commanded all the packs in this region of space. Good, Doan said finally. When the time comes, I want to face him directly. The Forsaken had been careful to stay hidden for the first 7 years. They rescued the abandoned, but they left no witnesses. They struck quickly and vanished without a trace. The packs knew that something was happening, but they did not know what. They called it the ghost phenomenon. Ships would arrive at abandonment sites to find nothing but empty shelters and strange messages carved into stone. But 3 years ago, Doan had decided it was time to change tactics. The Forsaken were strong enough now. It was time to let the packs know that they were not ghosts. They were wolves. The first open raid had targeted a pack convoy carrying supplies to a wealthy core world. The Forsaken ships had appeared out of nowhere, disabled the escort vessels with architect weapons that shut down power systems without causing harm, and taken half the cargo. They had left the crews alive and uninjured. But before they vanished, Doan had broadcast a message. "I am the small wolf. I speak for the Forsaken, the ones you abandoned. We do not come for revenge. We come for justice. From this day forward, every person you throw away will be rescued. Every crime you commit against the helpless will be answered. You cannot stop us. You cannot find us. You can only fear us." The packs had not believed it at first. They had laughed at the idea of abandoned weaklings threatening the great fleets. But raid after raid proved the truth. The Forsaken could strike anywhere, anytime. Their ships were faster. Their weapons were stranger. Their intelligence network was everywhere. That network was run by a man named Hyunwoo. He was 40 years old, small and quiet, with glasses that he did not actually need. Before his abandonment, he had been an accountant on a pack cargo ship. The admiral had decided that accountants were not essential during a food shortage. Hyunwoo had nearly died on a frozen moon before the Forsaken found him. Now he was the most dangerous spy master in human space. Hyunwoo did not use traditional spies. Instead, he found people like himself inside the pack fleets. The overlooked, the underestimated, the small and weak and quiet, people that the powerful never noticed. He offered them a choice: stay invisible and report what they saw, or be rescued and join the Forsaken openly. Most chose to stay. They became Hyunwoo's eyes and ears inside every major pack fleet. The information they provided was priceless. The Forsaken knew about abandonment missions before they happened. They knew about fleet movements, political conflicts, and secret deals. They knew everything. Today, Hyunwoo had brought news that made Dohan smile for the first time in weeks. Admiral Taiwan is planning a major abandonment, Hyunwoo reported. 300 people from his flagship alone. Elderly workers, injured soldiers, and children whose parents died in a recent accident. He plans to drop them on a moon called KR-7. Dohan's smile grew sharper. KR-7. The same moon where Taiwan had abandoned him 10 years ago. The admiral was either ignorant or arrogant. Perhaps both. "Prepare the fleet," Dohan ordered. "We will be waiting for him." The rescue operation was perfect. The Forsaken ships were hiding behind KR-7's largest mountain when Taiwan's shuttle arrived. They waited until the abandonment was complete, until Taiwan's ships had turned and started to leave. Then they struck. Sujin led the assault team that disabled the escort vessels. Yuna, now the Forsaken's chief engineer, coordinated the technical attack that shut down their weapons and engines. Manzu, 83 years old, but still sharp as a blade, commanded the rescue team that collected the abandoned and brought them to safety. Dohan himself appeared on Taiwan's view screen. The Supreme Commander stared at the small figure with obvious confusion. Then recognition dawned in his eyes. "You," Taiwan whispered. "The little cub. You should be dead." "Many people have told me that," Dohan replied. "They were all wrong. Today, I am taking these people that you threw away. Tomorrow I will take more. And one day, Admiral, I will come for you." Before Taiwan could respond, Dohan cut the connection. The Forsaken ships vanished into the darkness, leaving behind 300 grateful survivors, and one message burned into the hull of Taiwan's flagship. "We remember what you threw away." Back on the Silent Vengeance, Sujin found Dohan standing alone at the viewing window. "That was risky," she said. showing your face to Taiwan. Now he knows who you are. Doan nodded slowly. I wanted him to know. I wanted him to remember the small boy he condemned to death. I wanted him to understand that his judgment was wrong. He turned to face her. Fear is a weapon, Sujin. Taiwan has never feared anything in his life. Now he will fear me. That fear will make him angry. And anger will make him stupid. Sujin studied her commander's face. You are planning something bigger than rescue missions. Yes, Dawn admitted. The time for hiding is ending. The time for striking from shadows is almost over. Soon, we will step into the light. And when we do, the packs will face a choice. Change their ways or face destruction. And Taiwan? Dawn's eyes grew cold. Taiwan will learn what it means to be abandoned. I promise you that. The stars glittered outside the window, cold and distant. But they no longer seemed so hostile. They were a battlefield now. And the smallest cub had become the most dangerous wolf in the pack. The War Council of the United Pack Fleet gathered in the great hall of the flagship Eternal Dawn. 12 admirals sat around a massive table made of polished metal, their faces grim and worried. At the head of the table sat Supreme Commander Taiwan, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. Enough, Taiwan growled. I have heard enough excuses. In the past 3 years, this small wolf has humiliated us 47 times. He has stolen our supplies, freed our prisoners, and made us look like fools. And none of you can tell me how to stop him. Admiral Minho, a thin man with nervous eyes, spoke carefully. Supreme Commander, we have tried everything. His ships are too fast. His weapons are too advanced. His intelligence network knows our movements before we make them. Some of the crews are starting to whisper that he is not human, that he's some kind of ghost or demon. He is a 17-year-old runt that I threw away on a dead moon, Taiwan snarled. He is nobody. He is nothing. And I will not rest until I have crushed him under my boot. He stood and walked to the great window that overlooked the fleet. 1,000 warships floated in formation around the flagship, their weapons bristling like the spines of angry beasts. This was the greatest military force humanity had ever assembled. The combined power of 12 pack fleets united under his command. We have been defensive for too long, Taiwan declared. We have been waiting for the small wolf to strike and then chasing shadows. That ends now. I have ordered every ship, every soldier, every resource to converge on this location. We will hunt down the Forsaken and destroy them completely. No survivors. No mercy. No more running. Admiral Yunsu, the oldest member of the council, frowned deeply. Supreme Commander, this is madness. If we commit our entire fleet to this hunt, we leave our colonies unprotected. We leave our trade routes open to pirates. The economic damage alone could take decades to repair. I do not care about economics, Taiwan replied. I care about victory. The Forsaken have made us look weak. If we do not destroy them utterly, every rebel and criminal in the galaxy will think they can challenge us. This is not just about revenge. This is about survival. But it was about revenge, and everyone in the room knew it. Taiwan had not been the same since the small wolf had appeared on his view screen. The sight of that small, scarred face had done something to him. It had awakened a fear that he had never felt before. A fear that his judgment could be wrong. A fear that the people he had thrown away might one day return to judge him far away, hidden in the depths of an asteroid field. Dawn received the report from Hyunwoo's spy network. 1,200 ships, Hyunwoo said. Every warship in the United Pack Fleet. They are gathering at coordinates that suggest they know the general location of our outer bases. Not precise, but close enough to be dangerous. Dawn studied the holographic map floating above the table. His war council sat around him. their faces showing various degrees of concern. Sujin, Yuna, Mansu, and a dozen others who had risen to leadership positions among the Forsaken. 1,200 ships against our 83. Mansu muttered. Those are not good numbers, boy. Numbers are not everything, Dohan replied quietly. If they were, we would have died on KR 711 years ago. Sujin leaned forward. What is your plan? We cannot fight them ship to ship. Even with architect technology, we would be overwhelmed. Dohan smiled. It was a strange smile, cold and knowing. I have been preparing for this moment for 10 years. Taiwan thinks he is hunting us, but he's walking into a trap that I designed before he even knew I existed. He turned to Hyunwoo. How many of our people are inside the pack fleet? 347, Hyunwoo answered. Embedded in crews throughout the armada. Accountants, cooks, cleaners, nurses. The invisible people that no one notices. Are they ready? They've been ready for years. Dohan nodded and addressed his council. We will not fight the pack fleet with weapons. We will fight them with truth. For generations, the packs have told themselves that abandonment is necessary, that throwing away the weak makes everyone stronger. But deep inside, many of them know this is wrong. They have seen friends and family condemned. They have followed orders that made them sick with shame. They have stayed silent because they believed they were alone. He pressed a button and the holographic map changed. It now showed a web of connections, hundreds of names linked to ships throughout the pack armada. We are going to show them that they are not alone. When the battle begins, our people inside the fleet will broadcast testimonies. Real stories from real survivors. Mothers who were separated from children. Soldiers who were abandoned after being wounded in service. Children who watched their parents taken away. The truth will spread through the fleet like fire, and the crews will have to choose. Continue following leaders who would throw them away or join us. Mansu looked skeptical. And if they choose to keep fighting? Then we will disable their ships without killing them. The architect weapons can shut down power systems cleanly. No one has to die. But I believe that when faced with the truth, many will make the right choice. Humanity is not cruel by nature. We have simply been taught to be cruel by leaders who benefited from our cruelty. The council debated through the night. Some thought the plan was brilliant. Others thought it was madness. But in the end they agreed. There was no better option. 3 days later, the pack armada entered the asteroid field where the Forsaken waited. 1,200 ships in perfect formation, weapons powered and ready. At their head flew the Eternal Dawn, with Admiral Taiwan standing on the bridge like a conquering hero. Find them, Taiwan ordered. Destroy them. The search lasted for hours. The asteroid field was vast, and the Forsaken had hidden their ships well. But eventually, a scout vessel detected an energy signature. Then another. Then a dozen more. There, Taiwan pointed at the tactical display. That is their main base. All ships, attack formation. Prepare to fire on my command. But before he could give the order, every screen on every ship in the armada flickered. The tactical displays were replaced by a face. A small, scarred face with eyes that burned like distant stars. Admiral Taiwan, Dohan said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. We meet again. Kill the transmission, Taiwan barked. Override the signal. You cannot override this, Dohan replied. This signal is using architect technology that your engineers cannot understand. Every person in your fleet is watching. Every person in your fleet is listening. And they deserve to hear the truth. The image changed. Now it showed a woman with gray hair and gentle eyes. She spoke slowly, painfully. My name is Grandmother Yunji. 30 years ago, I raised children on the Eternal Dawn. I loved them like my own. When I grew old, the pack threw me away on a frozen moon. They told me I was useless. But I was not useless. I had wisdom to share. I had love to give. I survived because a boy named Doan refused to let me die. The image changed again. A man with a scarred face and mechanical eyes. My name is Uncle Jung-ho. I lost my sight saving 2 engineers during the Nebula accident. My reward was abandonment. The pack told me I was a burden. But I was not a burden. I was a hero. And I will never forget how I was treated. Image after image. Story after story. Hundreds of testimonies from hundreds of survivors. Children crying for parents. Parents mourning children. Soldiers abandoned by the commanders they trusted. Workers discarded after decades of loyal service. The truth spread through the pack fleet like a disease. Crews watched in horror. Many of them had similar stories. Many of them had lost someone to abandonment. Many of them had followed orders while feeling sick inside. On the eternal dawn, Taiwan screamed at his officers. Shut it down. Attack now. Destroy them before this spreads. But it was too late. The damage was done. When Taiwan gave the order to attack, half of his ships did not respond. Their crews had seen enough. Their consciences had awakened dawn on the silent vengeance. Dahan watched the chaos with satisfaction. Then he spoke again, his voice reaching every ship in both fleets. You have a choice. You can continue to serve leaders who see you as disposable, who will throw you away the moment you become inconvenient. Or you can join us. The Forsaken do not abandon our people. The Forsaken do not measure worth by strength or age or health. With us, you will never be thrown away. The choice is yours. Silence hung over the asteroid field. Then, one by one, ships began to move. They broke formation from the pack fleet and drifted toward the Forsaken positions. 1 ship, then 10, then 100, then 500. Admiral Taiwan watched his armada crumble with disbelief. This was not possible. This could not be happening. But it was happening. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. The battle of the asteroid field lasted 4 hours. But it was not really a battle. It was a transformation. Dohan had spent 10 years preparing for this moment. He had placed his people throughout the pack fleet. He had gathered testimonies from thousands of survivors. He had waited patiently for Taiwan to bring all his forces together in one place. And when the moment came, he did not strike with weapons. He struck with truth. Ship after ship defected from the pack formation. Captains, who had lost family to abandonment, refused to fire on the Forsaken. Crews who had watched the testimonies decided they could no longer serve leaders who would throw them away. By the time the chaos settled, over 800 ships had switched sides. The remaining 400 pack vessels were disabled by the architect weapons. Their engines went dark. Their weapons powered down. Their crews found themselves alive and unharmed, but completely helpless. Dohan gave strict orders. No killing, no revenge attacks. The prisoners were to be treated with dignity and respect. This was not about punishment. This was about change. Admiral Taiwan tried to flee. His flagship, the Eternal Dawn, still had partial power, and he ordered his crew to make a run for open space. But Dohan had anticipated this. The silent vengeance was waiting. The 2 ships faced each other among the drifting asteroids. The great pack flagship and the smaller Forsaken vessel. David and Goliath, except this time David had won. Admiral Taiwan. Dawn's voice came through the communications channel. Your fleet is destroyed. Your power is broken. You have nowhere to run. Surrender now, and I promise you will not be harmed. Taiwan's response was a scream of rage. I will never surrender to you. You are nothing. A defective child that I should have killed instead of abandoning. Perhaps you should have, Dohan agreed calmly. But you did not. And now you must face the consequences of your mercy. The architect weapons disabled the Eternal Dawn completely. Boarding teams led by Sujin secured the ship and captured the bridge crew. Within an hour, Admiral Taiwan stood in chains on the deck of the Silent Vengeance, facing the small man who had haunted his nightmares for 3 years. Do-hun studied his former tormentor in silence. Taiwan had aged in the past 11 years. His hair was gray now, his face lined with wrinkles. But his eyes still held the same arrogance, the same contempt for weakness. "Well," Taiwan spat. You gonna kill me? Is this your great revenge?" "No," Do-hun said simply. "Killing you would be too easy, too quick. You would become a martyr, and someone would use your memory to justify more cruelty." He stepped closer, his small form seeming to grow larger in the dim light of the bridge. "I have something better in mind." He turned to Sujin. "Prepare a shuttle. Load it with 3 months of basic supplies, food, water, and a simple shelter kit." Taiwan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "No, you cannot." "I can," Do-hun replied. "I am going to give you exactly what you gave me. Exactly what you gave 43 people 11 years ago. I am going to abandon you on a dead moon with nothing but the most basic supplies. If you are strong enough, you will survive. If you are not, you will die alone, knowing that no one is coming to save you. This is murder. No, this is justice. This is the fate you chose for thousands of people. You called it necessary. You called it survival. Now you will experience it yourself." Taiwan was dragged to the shuttle bay. He screamed and cursed and threatened. He promised revenge. He begged for death instead. But Do-hun was unmoved. The shuttle carried the former Supreme Commander to a barren moon on the edge of the system. The soldiers unloaded the supplies and left without a word. As the shuttle lifted off, Do-hun's voice came through Taiwan's emergency radio one final time. "Goodbye, Admiral. If you survive, perhaps you will understand what you did to us. Perhaps you will learn that every life has value, even the lives of the small and weak and old. Or perhaps you will simply die, alone and forgotten, like you wanted us to die. Either way, you will never hurt anyone again." The shuttle vanished into the stars, leaving Taiwan alone on the frozen surface. His screams echoed across the empty landscape, heard by no one. The aftermath of the battle changed humanity forever. The United Pack Fleet collapsed. Without Taiwan's iron grip, the alliance of pack fleets fell apart. Some tried to resist, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the combined forces of the Forsaken and the defectors. Others surrendered immediately, hoping for mercy. Do-hun showed them mercy. He did not conquer or enslave. He did not take revenge on those who had supported the old system. Instead, he offered a new way. The Pax believed that strength was everything, he announced to the scattered remains of human civilization. They measured worth by what a person could carry or kill. They threw away anyone who did not meet their standards. This way of thinking nearly destroyed us. It made us cruel and fearful and small. He stood before a massive assembly of humans from across the stars. Tens of thousands of people, former pack members and Forsaken alike, gathered to hear him speak. He was still small, still thin, still looking like a teenager, despite being 27 years old. But no one who saw him thought of him as weak anymore. From this day forward, we choose a different path. No one is expendable. No one is thrown away. The old, the sick, the weak, the different, all of them have value. All of them deserve protection. Humanity did not survive the void because we were strong. We survived because we carried each other, because we refused to abandon our own. Today, we remember who we are. The crowd roared with voices that had once been silenced. Former outcasts and former oppressors stood together, united by a vision of a better future. In the weeks that followed, the Forsaken worked to rebuild human society. They distributed architect technology freely, sharing the gifts that had saved them with everyone. Medical systems that could cure almost any disease. Food synthesizers that could end hunger. Construction drones that could build homes for the homeless. The miracles that Dohan had found on KR-7 became the inheritance of all humanity. Sujin became the commander of the new unified fleet, a force dedicated to protection rather than conquest. Yuna, her sight restored by architect medicine, led a team of engineers who adapted alien technology for human use. Hyunwoo transformed his spy network into an information service that helped people find lost family members across the galaxy. Mansu, now 84 years old, opened a school to teach young people the arts of defense, ensuring that the next generation could protect themselves without becoming oppressors. And Dohan? Dohan refused any title or position of power. He had never wanted to rule. He had only wanted justice. On the anniversary of the abandonment, 11 years to the day after Taiwan had left him to die on KR-7, Dohan returned to that frozen moon. He walked alone to the place where he had watched the pack fleet disappear into the stars. He knelt in the frozen ground and placed his hand on the cold stone. "We did it," he whispered to the ghost of that terrible day. "We survived. We grew strong. We came back. And we changed everything." He felt a presence behind him and turned to see Yuna and Mansu approaching. The blind woman who could see now. The old man who had refused to die. His first friends. His first family among the Forsaken. "The council is waiting," Yuna said gently. "There are decisions to make, people to help, work to do." Dohan nodded and rose to his feet. He took one last look at the barren landscape that had been his grave and his birthplace. "The packs called me the smallest cub," he said quietly. "They threw me away because I was weak. But they forgot the most important truth about humanity. It is not the strong who inherit the stars. It is the stubborn, the determined, the ones who refuse to die." He turned and walked back toward the shuttle, flanked by his oldest companions. Behind them, the sun rose over KR-7, painting the frozen landscape in shades of gold and orange. The smallest cub had returned, and he had remade the stars in his image, not with conquest, not with cruelty, but with compassion, determination, and an unbreakable will. This was the legacy of the Forsaken. This was the gift of the small wolf. This was the future of humanity. And it was only the beginning.